Welcome back to the channel, everybody. If you thought the drama between Brandon Gibbs and Julia Trubkina was over just because they survived the last resort, you need to sit down for this one. We are diving into a massive rumor that is completely taking over the 90-Day Fiancé universe today. We are talking about a rumored $1.7 million real estate move. Whispers of Julia packing her bags and leaving the United States, and claims that the couple might be walking away from TLC for good. Cut to B-roll of Brandon and Julia on 90 Day Fiancé. Since day one, Julia has made it crystal clear that she was not built for farm life in Virginia. From the morning animal chores to the constant tension with Brandon's parents, Ron and Betty, Julia has been begging for a different lifestyle. But did Brandon finally cave and make a multi-million-dollar move? And more importantly, did he do it without her? Let's break down exactly what is happening, where Julia is right now, and why fans are convinced this is the end of an era. Before we get into the $1.7 million elephant in the room, make sure you smash that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss out on the latest reality TV tea. Let's get into it. All right, let's talk about the money. Recently, the internet has been buzzing with a rumor that Brandon sold a house for a staggering $1.7 million. Now, if you know anything about Brandon and Julia's financial storyline on the show, this number sounds absolutely wild. We watched them struggle to afford a basic apartment just to get away from Ron and Betty's farm. Show screenshots of fan forums or blurred house listings. So, where's this $1.7 million coming from? There are a few theories floating around. Theory number one, this isn't Brandon's personal starter home, but rather a property tied to his family's estate or the farm itself. We know Ron and Betty's farm is a massive piece of property. Could Brandon be involved in liquidating some of the family's assets? Theory number two is that Brandon and Julia have been quietly investing their TLC paychecks and influencer money, and they flipped a major property. But here's where the gossip gets dark. Fans are speculating that if a house was sold for that much money, it might have been liquidated in preparation for a split. Usually, when married reality stars start selling off major assets, it's a massive red flag that lawyers are about to get involved. While the $1.7 million figure is still unverified and heavily debated in the 90-day Facebook groups, the timing of this financial rumor is incredibly suspicious given Julia's current location. And that brings us to the biggest piece of evidence that things are not okay. Julia is not in the United States. That's right. After facing an incredibly difficult year, including the heartbreaking loss of her beloved German Shepherd, Simba, Julia packed her bags and left America. Cut to screenshots of Julia's Instagram in Serbia. Julia recently shocked her followers by posting photos from Belgrade, Serbia, posing with her parents and her sibling. Now, on the surface, this looks like a beautiful family reunion. Julia captioned the photos saying she was bringing people together who haven't communicated in years. But fans immediately noticed one glaring omission. Brandon was nowhere to be found. Host on camera. The comments flooded in. Where is Brandon? Did you guys split? Julia has remained completely silent on the issue. Now, we have to look at the history here. On the last resort, one of their biggest explosive fights was over Julia wanting to bring her parents to America and Brandon pushing back hard against it. He didn't want the financial burden and he didn't want the stress. So, Julia flying all the way to Europe to see them, alone, speaks volumes. B-roll of Brandon in the gym. While Julia is in Europe, what is Brandon doing? He's posting gym selfies. He recently uploaded Instagram stories showing himself hitting the weights, accompanied by heavy emotional rock music, specifically Tears Don't Fall by Bullet for My Valentine. It is classic breakup behavior, guys. Hitting the gym, posting moody songs, while your wife is on another continent. The writing might be on the wall. This brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, their future with TLC. The rumor mill is spinning that Julia and Brandon are officially done with the 90-Day Fiancé franchise. If Julia has relocated to Europe indefinitely, filming for a show based on the K, one visa process in America becomes virtually impossible. Furthermore, Julia has been very vocal in the past about the heavy toll the show takes on her mental health. She's had her green card struggles, she was terrified of deportation, and she's had to live her marital issues out on national television. If the rumors of the $1.7 million sale are true, they might simply not need the TLC paycheck anymore. If they secured the bag, they might be choosing peace and privacy over another season of manufactured drama with Ron and Betty. But if they are splitting up, TLC might just pivot and cast Julia on the single life. Can you imagine Julia dating in Europe while Brandon is back on the farm? The ratings would be insane. For years, Brandon Gibbs and Julia Trubkina have been among the more recognizable couples to emerge from the 90-Day Fiancé universe. Their relationship began with an international romance, moved through a difficult adjustment to life on Brandon's parents' Virginia farm, survived repeated family conflicts, and eventually developed into a marriage that has continued long after their original season. Now, in 2026, their story has entered another extraordinary chapter. The couple are parents. Julia has appeared in the latest 90-Day franchise programming. Their relationship has continued to attract intense attention online, and old questions about where they live, whether they are still together, and whether Julia truly wants to remain in America have resurfaced. That has created the perfect environment for sensational headlines. One recent video headline states, Brandon sold his house, Julia Trubkina leave USA and TLC, $1.7 million, 90-Day Fiancé. A related social media post has circulated an even different figure, reportedly $1.9 million. Yet a search of available recent reporting does not establish either sale price as fact. That distinction matters. There is a real story here, but it is not necessarily the story the viral headline suggests. The headline versus the evidence. The first thing fans should understand is that there are 3 separate claims buried inside the viral headline. Brandon sold his house. Julia is leaving the United States or leaving TLC. A house connected to the couple is worth or sold for approximately $1.7 million. At present, these claims should not be treated as established facts. The available reporting confirms that Brandon and Julia eventually purchased their own home after moving away from Brandon's parents' farm. In November 2022, reports quoted the couple announcing that they had purchased their first home and described the move as a new stage in their lives. Julia reportedly said the new property was about 2 hours from her in-laws. That is a documented milestone. What is not established by the reliable sources located for this article is that Brandon subsequently sold that property for $1.7 million. Likewise, the evidence does not show a confirmed announcement that Julia is permanently leaving the United States. In fact, the most recent documented developments point in the opposite direction. Julia and Brandon welcomed their first child, a son, after a difficult labor in late 2025. They announced the birth publicly in March 2026. Julia also appeared in 90-Day, the Single Life Season 5, although she was not one of the show's conventional single daters. She appeared alongside franchise personalities during the season's Dominican Republic storyline. So the idea that Julia simply disappeared from America and TLC does not match the currently documented timeline. But that does not mean there is no reason fans are asking questions. There is. And it goes back to the beginning. From Russia to Virginia, how Julia and Brandon's story began. When viewers first met Julia Trubkina and Brandon Gibbs, their relationship already contained the basic ingredients of a classic 90-Day Fiancé storyline. Julia was from Russia. Brandon was from Virginia. They met through a mutual connection and developed a long-distance relationship. Brandon eventually traveled to meet Julia, and the relationship progressed quickly. The couple became engaged during a trip to Iceland, and Julia eventually came to the United States on a K-1 visa. For viewers, however, the central drama was not simply whether Brandon and Julia loved each other. It was where they were going to live. Brandon was deeply connected to his parents' rural Virginia lifestyle. He lived with Ron and Betty Gibbs and helped with the family farm and related business. Julia, meanwhile, had very different expectations for her new life in America. Her arrival placed her directly inside Brandon's family environment. Instead of moving immediately into a private home with her fiancé, Julia found herself living under the same roof as his parents. That became one of the defining conflicts of their original 90-Day Fiancé season. According to contemporary coverage, Brandon's parents expected the couple to follow household rules, including sleeping in separate bedrooms before marriage. Julia also faced expectations involving farm work and animal care. For Julia, the issue was bigger than chores. It was about independence. She had crossed an ocean to begin a married life with Brandon, but she quickly realized that she was entering an existing family system rather than creating a new household from scratch. That tension became one of the franchise's most memorable storylines. The farm became a symbol of the relationship. The Gibbs family farm was never simply a setting. It became a symbol. For Brandon's parents, the property represented family, history, work, responsibility, and the future they imagined for their son. For Julia, the farm increasingly represented a lack of privacy and independence. The contrast was especially powerful because Brandon himself was caught between the two worlds. He loved Julia. He also had the long-standing connection to his parents and their way of life. That conflict became a recurring theme throughout the couple's appearances. Julia wanted Brandon to prioritize their marriage. Brandon frequently attempted to maintain peace between Julia and his parents. Neither approach completely satisfied the other side. The result was a cycle familiar to 90-Day Fiancé viewers. Julia felt Brandon was not standing up for her. Brandon felt caught in the middle, and his parents felt that Julia was trying to pull him away from the family. Eventually, the couple did leave the farm. That was not a rumor. It happened. Leaving the farm was the first major turning point. By 2021, Brandon and Julia had moved into an apartment. The move represented a major change in their relationship. Contemporary reports noted that the couple had signed a lease and that Brandon's parents were unhappy about the way the move was handled. For Julia, however, moving away from the farm was a victory. She and Brandon finally had a home where they could make their own decisions. The irony was that Brandon was not necessarily as enthusiastic about city living as Julia. Later coverage of the couple's life showed that the move improved their relationship, but Brandon still missed the rural lifestyle. That difference never completely disappeared. It became one of the reasons the couple continued to debate their future. The Florida possibility. At one stage, Brandon and Julia also discussed Florida. The couple reportedly traveled to Florida to investigate the possibility of moving there, and the idea created another potential clash with Brandon's parents. For viewers, this was significant. Florida represented something larger than a change of address. It represented the possibility of building a life far away from the family farm. Yet the Florida plan did not ultimately become the definitive ending to their housing story. Instead, the couple continued to navigate the complicated question of where they belonged. They were no longer living on the farm, but they also had not completely severed themselves from the family, and that middle ground would eventually lead to another major development. Brandon and Julia bought their own home. In 2022, the couple announced that they had purchased their first home. This is one of the most important facts when evaluating the current Brandon sold his house rumor. The couple really did become homeowners. A report published by In Touch and carried by Yahoo described their November 2022 announcement. The couple reportedly wrote that they had bought their first home and described the experience as a new and unknown stage in their lives. Julia also indicated that the property was approximately 2 hours away from her in-laws. That announcement transformed their housing story. The couple had gone from Brandon's parents' farm, apartment, possible relocation, their own house. It was a remarkable evolution. For Julia especially, owning a house with Brandon represented a kind of independence she had wanted since arriving in America. The woman who once complained about farm rules was now part of a married couple with a home of its own. That is why the current claim that Brandon has sold his house sounds believable to fans. There really is a house. There really was a major move toward independence. But the existence of a house does not prove that it was later sold. Where does the $1.7 million number come from? This is the most important unanswered question. The viral headline uses the number $1.7 million. Another social media result associated with the same basic story uses $1.9 million. Those conflicting numbers should immediately make viewers cautious. If a property had genuinely been sold for $1.7 million, a reliable property record, reputable entertainment publication, or a direct statement from Brandon, or Julia would ideally support the claim. The available sources reviewed for this article do not provide that confirmation. That means the $1.7 million figure should be treated as an unverified claim, not a confirmed sale price. It is also possible that a figure in a viral headline refers to a property's estimated value, the value of an unrelated property, a different celebrity's home, an exaggerated internet estimate, or simply a number inserted into a video title to attract clicks. That distinction is especially important with reality television personalities. Property value websites can generate estimates that have nothing to do with the actual amount a homeowner receives. A house can be worth $1.7 million on one website and sell for considerably less, or considerably more, in an actual transaction. Likewise, a headline can say $1.7 million without establishing that the person received $1.7 million. So until a credible source confirms the transaction, fans should not repeat the number as established fact. Did Brandon actually sell the house? As of the latest information reviewed for this report, there is no reliable confirmation that Brandon Gibbs sold his home for $1.7 million. That does not prove that he has not sold it. It means the sale has not been sufficiently verified in the sources available. There is a significant difference. A private real estate transaction can happen without an entertainment publication immediately reporting it. Homeowners are not required to announce every real estate decision to 90-Day Fiancé fans. Property records may also be difficult to connect confidently to a celebrity without an exact address and verified ownership information. For that reason, responsible reporting should say, there are online claims that Brandon sold his house, but the sale and $1.7 million figure have not been independently confirmed. It should not say, Brandon sold his house for $1.7 million. That second statement turns a rumor into a fact. And what about Julia leaving America? The second part of the viral headline is even more dramatic. Julia Trubkina leave USA and TLC strongly implies that Julia has made a permanent decision to leave the country and possibly end her relationship with the franchise. Again, there is no reliable confirmation of that interpretation in the sources reviewed. In fact, Julia has remained involved with the 90-Day universe. In 2026, she appeared in 90-Day, the Single Life Season 5 programming. Coverage explained that Julia was not actually single. Rather, she was involved in the storyline surrounding Sophie Sierra and Liz Woods and appeared during the Dominican Republic trip. That is a very important detail. The title Julia Trubkina on the Single Life could easily confuse viewers into believing that she had separated from Brandon. But she had not been presented as a conventional single cast member. Her marriage remained part of the story. Indeed, Brandon himself reportedly joked publicly about Julia's involvement with the Single Life while they were working on their marriage. So the program appearance itself should not be interpreted as proof of a divorce. Why would Julia appear on a show called The Single Life if she is married? This is one of the strangest pieces of the current story. The title 90-Day. The Single Life naturally suggests that every person appearing on it is single. But reality television franchises frequently use familiar personalities in supporting roles. Julia's participation was connected to friends and travel rather than a straightforward attempt to date other men. That distinction is crucial. A viewer seeing a thumbnail that says Julia on The Single Life might immediately assume Brandon and Julia broke up. But the documented situation was more complicated. Julia was still married to Brandon. The couple had also recently entered parenthood. That makes the viral Julia leaves Brandon, America, and TLC narrative especially difficult to reconcile with the documented timeline. The marriage survived another major test. Brandon and Julia's relationship has never been presented as perfect. That is one reason their story has lasted. The couple have repeatedly faced conflicts involving where they should live, Brandon's relationship with his parents, Julia's relationship with his parents, finances, family boundaries, communication, their future, and eventually parenthood. Their appearance on 90-Day, The Last Resort, put their marriage under another microscope. The series is built around couples confronting serious relationship problems. Brandon and Julia's participation reinforced the impression that they were struggling. But appearing on relationship television is not the same thing as announcing a breakup. In reality, their marriage continued. The fertility storyline changed everything. By 2025, another major issue had entered their story: the possibility of becoming parents. During 90 Day Fiancé, Happily Ever After, Brandon expressed concern about Julia's fertility and the couple's attempts to understand why they were struggling to conceive. A 2025 report from Us Weekly described Brandon's concern that Julia had not immediately scheduled a recommended fertility appointment. This was an emotionally sensitive storyline. For Julia, fertility was not simply a plot point. It was deeply personal. The couple's conversations about children, therefore, carried a different weight than their earlier arguments about apartments or farm chores. Their marriage was no longer only about deciding where to live. They were trying to decide what their family would look like. And then came the news that surprised viewers. Brandon and Julia announced their pregnancy. On August 26, 2025, Brandon and Julia announced that they were expecting their first child. People reported the pregnancy announcement and noted that the couple had married in April 2020. The announcement was significant for another reason. The couple had spent years discussing whether parenthood was possible. Now it was happening. The announcement also changed how viewers interpreted their relationship. Whatever problems Brandon and Julia had experienced, they were entering a new stage together. They were no longer simply a married couple trying to find the right home. They were becoming parents. Their son's birth was kept private for months. The couple ultimately welcomed a baby boy in late 2025. They did not immediately tell the public. That decision itself became part of the story. When Brandon and Julia finally announced the birth in March 2026, they explained that the delivery had been extremely difficult. News reported that Julia experienced more than 20 hours of labor and eventually required surgery. The situation became serious because the baby's heart rate was reportedly showing signs of distress and the umbilical cord was wrapped around his neck. Julia also experienced a severe reaction to the epidural and had to undergo general anesthesia. The couple chose not to have professional filming or photography at the hospital. Their priority was simply a safe delivery. That decision tells us something important about their current relationship with fame. Fame versus privacy. From the beginning, 90 Day Fiancé has placed Brandon and Julia's private lives in front of millions of viewers. Fans have watched their arguments. They have watched their family conflicts. They have watched them move. They have watched them discuss children. They have watched them seek counseling. But becoming parents created a new boundary. The couple did not want the birth itself turned into a television spectacle. Brandon reportedly described the experience as dividing their lives into a before and after. Julia also discussed how frightening the delivery had been. After such an experience, it is understandable that the couple might become more selective about what they share. That is important when interpreting rumors about Julia leaving TLC. Choosing privacy does not automatically mean leaving the franchise. Choosing to protect a child from cameras does not mean ending a television career. Choosing not to reveal every detail of a family's life does not mean a marriage is over. Julia is now a mother, and that changes the equation. For years, Julia's story was primarily about adapting to America. Then it became about marriage. Then it became about finding independence. Then it became about fertility. Now it is about motherhood. That progression changes the emotional stakes. Julia's relationship with America was once defined largely by Brandon. She came to the country because of him. Her earliest storylines revolved around living with his parents. Her complaints centered on the farm. Her desire for a private home was connected to the marriage. Now she has a child born in the United States. That does not automatically determine where she will live forever. But it does mean that any decision to permanently leave the country would involve far more than simply packing a suitcase. It would involve Brandon, their child, their family, their legal circumstances, their careers, their finances, and their future as parents. That is why a headline saying Julia leaves USA